whenever I say that online or on air, even if I dare, I get attacked so much for it from people from like my base or my side of the argument. But I don't consider myself part of any team or any political faction. I don't see myself as right wing or left wing. I think anyone who's worked in London or lived in London over the last 20 years has seen how it's changed drastically. The fabric of the city. I mean, I've said on air before, it doesn't feel like an English city anymore.
No.
It's an international city in England. I get it. I get abused so much on Twitter and things for being like controlled opposition and this and that. And I don't know, I'm going down a bit of a ranting rabbit hole.
No, you're fine, mate. You know, I think a lot of people feel from the last few years, they feel like that they've been lied to so much that they don't really know where to turn, and they are quite disenfranchised. I think a lot of people do not want to see certain ideas, whether it be conservative, whether it be on the right. I think there are a lot of people that don't want to see that and actually refuse to have conversations about that, and would quite happily, instead of saying, let them just, you know, the old liberal sort of just whatever will be, let them, you know, let them speak their mind. I don't think we're going to see that.
They're all your old mates, all the communists, they're all your pals. I really, it makes me sad to hear you say that you think you're a wretched sinner.
I am, man. I am. And you know what? The guilt is good. Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 7 of the State of It podcast with your host, Lewis Brackpool. Today, I would like to welcome Ben Leo as my guest. Ben is a journalist, reporter, and presenter for GB News, and is known for his slick doorstepping skills when confronting high-profile politicians and activist groups when they least expect it. In this episode, we talked about the rapid change of demographics in British cities, and more specifically, London, and how many feel as though London isn't an English city anymore. We spoke about what Ben's main concerns are about Britain, a brief talk about Ofcom, the attempt of shutting down the National Conservative Convention in Brussels by the Mayor, and many more. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. This episode is available to watch on YouTube and Rumble, and to listen to on Spotify. Ben Leo, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you, good sir?
Yeah, very good, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. I think
we should have done this in the flesh because you're only down the road from me.
It's actually true. I don't know why I didn't think to do that, but yeah, it's very true. And it's funny because when I first came across your content, I think you were working at GB News at the time, and I had no idea you lived very close. But obviously, I'm not going to dox you or myself to the audience, obviously. But when I started chatting to you about, your work and all your reporting, I was actually very thrown off that you lived completely out of London, because usually everyone lives in London, has their own sort of circle. But yeah, it's been great.
I've worked in London for like, how long? Maybe 13 years. And every year, whether it's at the Sun newspaper or anywhere else on GB News, everyone's like, when are you moving to London? When are you moving to London? And my answer every time is, I'm not. I think it's an absolute shithole. And it gets worse every year, as we see. So yeah, we live by the seaside, and I love it. And I've got 2 young kids as well. So London is the last place I'd want to bring them up. Yeah, absolutely. I don't like going into London as well. I think for me, seeing London just sort of deteriorate over time. I mean, I think we're around the same age. I think I haven't actually asked. I don't want to ask because it's obviously rude, and it's a big giveaway. But I remember even growing up, I used to live in a place called Crawley. Not anymore, of course. You can't. Creepy Crawley, yeah. And I've watched that rapidly change for the past 20 years. And London is just the same, if not worse, and watching it deteriorate. But I don't blame you. I don't blame you for, only going to London for work and then just dipping straight out. Like, I don't blame you. It's a bit of a ball ache on the commute. It's like 2 hours door to door to the GB News studio. But
I mean, as I said, I've been doing it for more than a decade. I'm just used to it, and for what I get back, like the risk, I always look at things in life as the risk reward. Like, what is the risk of doing this, and what's the reward? I used to play poker quite a lot growing up, and I used to gamble quite a bit. Not so much in my older age with more responsibilities, but I look at everything like risk reward. So, what's the cost, and what am I going to get back? The cost is a 4-hour commute, bit of a ball ache sometimes, especially with the trains. But the reward is I get to live outside London by the seaside with the South Downs, with nice people, so I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, good on you, man. And by the way, I want to say before we properly get into this, you're doing fantastic work. I want to say ever since I saw your reporting where you were going out and not doorstepping, I wouldn't call it that. It's more sort of, you're just asking questions and you're just trying. I think one of the first videos I saw was, I think you went inside of a building to do with the Greens, I think, and you were questioning them about something in particular. I can't properly remember.
Greenpeace.
I think it might have been Greenpeace. Do you obviously you remember that?
Yeah, that was quite a big one. That was when Greenpeace protesters targeted Rishi Sunak's house in Yorkshire because he just approved loads of oil and gas licenses in the North Sea. So I just thought it'd be funny to go to their office and just do the same, and just be a bit of an arse and cause some mischief. But I've been doing loads before that.
Yes.
With like politicians and things, and Philip Schofield, Jeremy Hunt, Angela Rayner, all sorts of people for sort of timely or topical things. I mean, they're just really fun. I always love doing those, but I've not done them so much recently because I've been presenting quite a lot. I haven't had time, but I always love the sort of doorsteps because you get people off guard. And these days, whenever you try and get a response from someone, it goes through maybe press officers and marketing people or CEOs, and it gets signed off and filtered and diluted and legaled and whatever else. But when you get people in the street, you get their
raw reaction.
Yeah, so it's good fun. But I've not done them in a while. I miss them, but I will get out and about again shortly. It's been so busy at work with I've been presenting quite a lot and kind of getting to grips with that. So, but yeah, I'll get back to it.
I had Nick Dixon on last week, and we spoke briefly about Ofcom, and we spoke briefly about the online safety bill and whether he was concerned about the encroaching power of the online safety bill now transitioning to the internet as opposed to just broadcasting. Are you a bit sort of, I don't know if the term is nervous or concerned about whether Ofcom is either wielding too much power or it's what are your thoughts around that?
I think with Ofcom, they're just like any other government department, which is just pretty much infiltrated with leftists.
Right.
But the thing is, the same with schools and universities and pretty much any other public body or establishment these days. They don't even think that they're leftists. They just think being of a left persuasion is the right thing to do. For example, my friend's kid the other day, he's only 10, he came round and there was like some government press conference on the TV, and he pointed to the TV and said, Rishi Sunak, he's an evil man. So they're just teaching kids and university students that by default, anyone who is kind of right of centre is a very nasty, evil person. I mean, I always say, it's a great quote that, the right just think the left have bad ideas, but the left think the right are just like inherently bad people.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't consider myself left or right, but I look at people from the left and I just, I don't hate anyone. I've got no problem with people. I know probably they're acting with good intentions, but they're just wrong. But that's where Ofcom comes into play. I just look at them as any other government department or offshoot where they're just filled with leftists, and there's a lot of pressure on them as well from outside sources. There's big campaigns going on from, these nefariously funded groups. I'm not going to name them, give them the privilege of airtime, but there's some big money behind them.
Yep.
They'd argue there's big money behind GB News, which is fine. And there's a lot of pressure, but the fact that they were trying to shut GB News down before we'd even aired a second of broadcasting speaks volumes. They didn't know what the content was going to be.
It's true.
They decided that they didn't want to hear an alternative voice. and they've behaved as they have. So
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't got too much to say about Ofcom really. We knew the rules when we signed up, or when the powers that be at GBNU signed up to be a regulated broadcaster. I guess we're all trying our best to stick to that. I have to stick to that when I'm on air, which means doing things I don't want to do. There was an incident the other day with someone who had a sign in the background about kids and COVID vaccines, and I've had well documented public opinions on all the COVID stuff, and I had to apologise for the sign, even though I completely agree with it. But we know the rules and we stick by it, and we will stay within the rules.
Yeah, it's a shame that subjects like that are taboo, because it's as much as I do about the things surrounding that. You made a fantastic point as well about evil, because I can actually back what you've just set up, because I used to be a communist when I was like 17, 18. Yeah, how mad is that? And a massive transformation. And that's exactly the mentality I had. I thought, no, everyone on the right's evil. They're out to get the working man. They're out to get absolutely everyone. They undermine society. All these horrible things that I used to actually think. But then I think I questioned it, kind of like, well, if they're so evil, why do they keep coming back into power? Like, why aren't people seeing what I see? And then I realized it's narcissism, right? And I'm not a fan of Rishi Sunak. My listeners know this, and people who follow my content know this. And yeah, exactly, same with you. But there's, I don't think it's right to be evil to another human being in that respect, just because I disagree with them politically, or I disagree with how they operate, or policy, or their motives. There's lots of things with Rishi Sunak, such as Infosys and everything surrounding that need to be questioned. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's right. Maybe it's the Christianity. I don't know. Maybe it's that bias of me wanting to say, well, let's do this in a proper manner. But I understand exactly what you mean by that, because I used to think like that, and it's sad.
I think it's a really, it's ironic. The people that shout the loudest about being hateful and,
yes,
or racist, or whatever words they want to use. I mean, hate is the one word I really dislike. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, but it's kind of just banded around as if it's
sure.
You're full of hate. The ironic thing is, the people that shout the loudest about that kind of stuff are guilty of the very thing they're shouting about. I mean, it happens with, I always say, like, male feminists who are like really, really vocal male feminists. Like, we must protect women. Like, women, of course, we must, everyone supports equal rights for women, but these creepy men who are like, I'm an ally of women. Turns out they're always the sexual predators.
Yeah.
Like, more often than not, like, just absolute creeps. And same with these people from the left who go around calling everyone hateful and Nazis and stuff. Like, they are some of the most hateful, toxic people I've ever had the misfortune of coming across. So a lot of it is just projection.
Yes.
But that said, I've kind of matured a lot in recent years, maybe the last 10 years, where I realised that everyone, I like to be an optimist. I think the world is full of more good than bad.
That's nice.
Actually, I've decided that, I've seen from my own experience that despite people on the other side of the argument doing a lot of things I don't agree with, I can still see them acting through their own good faith. I don't think they're inherently bad people.
Of course.
Yeah. Who's to say I'm right anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we live in such a polarized world at the minute where the left and right have kind of blended, or they've almost. It's weird. It depends on where you go to. There are some people, like you've got the Paul Embry left wing types, who are open to talking about anti-woke stuff. Of course, calling out certain narratives. But then you have the people on that side of politics who will see that and think, well, that means that they're right wing now. And because of the concept of right wing being so evil, that sort of takes over. And it's a shame. And I think a lot of people, even on the right, I've seen some of the people on the right get things wrong when it comes to either civil liberties or, freedom of speech and expression. Sometimes that can go, or even We won't delve into this too much because I don't know too much about it, if I'm totally honest. But even subjects such as Israel, Palestine as well, sometimes a lot of the right miss the mark on various things.
Well, I got roasted for a couple of tweets a few weeks back saying, I think all I said was Israel, something akin to Israel needs to be careful about, take more care with the direction its bombs are heading, because whether you believe Hamas figures or not, whether it's 10,000 kids dead or 30,000 or even 1,000, for me, that's too many. And I don't care if they're Palestinian or Israeli, but whenever I say that online or on air, even if I dare, I get attacked so much for it from people from like my base or my side of the argument. But I don't consider myself part of any team or any political faction. I don't see myself as right wing or left wing, because I think actually like putting yourself in a box like that and identifying with a team is not good. Because actually I just pulled up a tweet from Zubi.
Yes.
He tweeted this in December last year, and I've loved it ever since, and it rings so true. And I wish a lot of people from the centre right would take heed of it. But he said, the problem with people attaching themselves too hard to communities beyond groupthink is that they feel compelled to defend the worst actions, words and members of said community. And they think going down with a sinking ship is a virtue when they're not even a captain.
That's really good. That's really good.
When I saw that, it kind of like summarised how I felt for a long time, where it's like, I don't want to be part of any particular tribe because I don't think it's very helpful. I just try and, I'm not saying I'm virtuous or anything, but just try and be as best a person I can, try and be happy, try and see the light in people.
That's
and
good.
when I see a sense of injustice, call it out, whether it's from the left or the right,
Yes, and I honestly, I think I respect you so much for that, man. I think that's really great. Unfortunately, politics is very tribal, as we've been seeing for the last few years. Well, I say few years, it's been forever, really, but it's really the sensitivity of it has sort of heightened from the past few years. That being said, talking about politics and your views and things like that, you obviously you express that you don't sit on the left or the right, in that kind of paradigm, if you will. But I guess to understand like what your mood is with regards to politics, what is happening in Britain, what issues are you concerned about the most that is happening within Britain?
Well, we spoke about London and how I don't want to live there, but that's a stark contrast to how I felt growing up. I used to do a lot of acting when I was a kid. I was in TV commercials and stuff, and some dramas and films and things. And I'd go to London a lot for castings and auditions, and also to go and watch Arsenal play at Highbury. And at that time, my brother lived in London, my sister did, and it was my dream to live in London as well. Like, I loved the place. It was buzzing. It was amazing. It was always high energy. It was always a good feeling when I went there. And I had this weird dream of wanting to live in Angel for some reason, because I think my brother lived there and it was near Highbury as well. But yeah, as I grew up, as the years went by, I just kind of, that dream pattered away. I mean, maybe it's just because I got older and maturer and my outlook changed. But I think anyone who's worked in London or lived in London over the last 20 years has seen how it's changed drastically. The fabric of the city. I mean, I've said on air before, it doesn't feel like an English city anymore.
No.
It's an international city in England. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just observing, my own experience. I think like what's the percent of Brits in? I know white British is something like
47 or less.
Right.
Something like that.
And for Brits generally, I'm not sure what the figure is, but it's basically, it's one of the only cities in the world where the capital doesn't represent the nation, the national demographics.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just a fact. And when that happens, the fabric of the society and the culture changes, of course. People have different priorities. People are, in London's case, they keep themselves to themselves in different boroughs or different areas. There's different groups of people. You've got for example, in Barking, Dagenham, there'll be like a big Islamic demographic. Then you've got Jews in Golders Green. Very few Londoners genuinely live there anymore. I think most of them have sold their council houses overnight, made $1 million or a couple of million quid, and buggered off to the shires or the coastal towns to buy great houses with no mortgages, which is fine. But for me, it doesn't feel like an English city, and I mean that's down to uncontrolled mass migration, both legal and illegal. And I think if that continues, you're going to keep seeing different parts of England slowly lose its identity and culture. And not just that, but you're getting there's a big attack on the monarchy and the royal family at the moment. I think a lot of people would love to see the monarchy be done with. I'm not a big monarchist,
Neither.
But I do like the idea that we have a constitutional monarchy where it's original, it's something to be proud of, it's something to shout about, it's something that not a lot of other countries have, even just for the traditional aspect of it. All the pomp and ceremony. I think it's a good thing in this day and age where everything is so shallow and empty, and everything's, do you know what I mean? Everything's just like. Everything's so fake these days. I just think it's nice to kind of have that last bit of history doing the rounds, in England. And it applies to so many different things as well. What we were talking about the other day, horse racing. They're trying to cancel the Grand National.
Oh yes, the Grand National. Yeah.
I get the safety concerns and stuff, and they've really watered down and diluted the race in recent years. So much so that Saturday's race just gone was nothing how it used to be. You had 20 horses jumping the last fence, all in contention, which never happened. But again, I kind of felt with the Grand National, just trying to take that away as well. It's just another small example of British traditions and, iconic British culture just being eroded away at. Whether it's intentional or not, I don't know.
I think it's interesting you mention all of this, because what I've always said, let's speak about the monarchy just briefly. So I'm not a royalist at all, and I think you're not either. I don't think. I think there's a lot of things within the royal family that need investigating, and there's a bit of corruption there, to say the least, in some aspects. I mean, do we even need to bring up Prince Andrew to really sort of try and understand the corruption and what went on there, which is obviously so wrong, and there's obviously questions that need answers with that. The problem that I have is when people just say, right, we'll just tear it down. And I'm like, well, hang on, whoa. Like, we have a problem with the people. It's the institution, right? That it's part of our heritage. It's part of our national identity. And you want to just completely tear that down after like decades and decades and decades and decades of just history of our identity, of our culture completely. You just want to take that down because there are people within this that are corrupting the institution, right? I have a lot of criticism when it comes to King Charles because, of course, his ties with certain people, namely people like the World Economic Forum and all of these sort of cats, where he would go give speeches and talk about climate alarmism and really push forward these sorts of narratives, which I have a big problem with. And there is that question, what do you do when your head of state and the government both are echoing from the same hymn sheet, right? They're both singing from the same hymn sheet. Like, what do you do? So a lot of people, I understand, want to turn around and say, just get rid of it. But you have to be careful what you wish for, is what I say, when it comes to making a drastic decision or a policy decision like that. But it's interesting you mention all of these because they're the same concerns that I have, exactly the same. Whether it be mass unfettered migration, whether it be our culture, whether it be just completely changing it to fit a progressive viewpoint or a progressive world. I think a lot of Brits are feeling exactly the same right now, especially Englishmen are feeling exactly the same. The problem is, I don't know what you think, but I think the establishment aren't taking it seriously.
I mean, I don't want to go down conspiracy corner, but I just kind of feel it's intentional, like...
Right. It feels that way, for sure.
Why wouldn't, when a conservative government has the power to control legal migration and they've promised to do it, okay, forget the small boats, they claim that they can't stop it, whatever, okay, we'll believe you on that front. But legal migration, they can stop. And when you've got a city the size of Birmingham coming every 2 years, which they're allowing to do, when they know very well that there's pressure on school places, you struggle to see a GP, you struggle to see a dentist, the NHS is on its knees, not least after COVID. And you know all these things. You know that your voters and the electorate want you to sort it out, and yet you don't do it. I mean, so the only logical explanation is the obvious one, which is
it's being allowed.
Either they don't care, either they're really incompetent at their job, or they're intentionally allowing it.
Yeah.
They even say that, that the argument is that they say migration is good for the economy, right? But latest GDP figures show that GDP per capita, which is the true measure of wealth per person, is how wealthy each individual in the country feels. GDP per capita contracted by, I think it was 0.7%, the last figures from the ONS. So that means people's quality of lives financially are going down, despite a city the size of Birmingham coming here over the last 2 years, 700,000 people. So it just completely blows apart the myth that migration is good for the economy as well, because it's not. So it's not good for the economy. It presents problems with integration and the culture, and also when you're talking about illegal migration and these guys coming on boats with their passports into the water and mobile phones, that's a massive national security risk. I mean, how many attacks and murders have we seen from undocumented or unknown migrants? There was a poor lad in Portsmouth, was it Portsmouth? Maybe Bournemouth, who was killed by a Serbian guy who had been allowed into the country despite being convicted of a double murder in Serbia. I think we knew, I don't know, I can't remember the exact details, but he was here, he shouldn't have been here, he should have been deported, and he went on to kill a poor British kid on a night out. So, yeah. But, the problem is you can't have these conversations anymore because you get accused of being called racist or xenophobic or, I couldn't give a damn if people coming across the channel or coming here legally were white Americans. I don't care. There's just too many people. The infrastructure's not there, and you can blame the Tories for that if you want. I'd probably blame them because they're just utterly useless. The infrastructure's not there. So on what planet can you take more people in? Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think I read a poll, and we have to take polls with a pinch of salt, obviously. But I think it's risen now. I think Matt Goodwin posted something quite recently. I think it was 80% of Brits are concerned about immigration. I think that was the figure, something along those lines. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a really serious issue that a lot of people are so, I don't know what the word is. I don't know if it's scared. I think a lot of people are waking up, but there's still a big percentage of people who will not touch it, will not talk about it because it makes them feel uncomfortable when it shouldn't. To say about cultural changes is an extremely important issue, right? And it's annoying that there are still people out there on mainstream media, in the establishment, in the Home Office, that say all these silly buzzwords to try and shut down honest conversation. And this is the mess that we're in. It's years and years and years of saying you're a racist or you're a xenophobe for talking about this issue. And then when someone finally cracks the dam and speaks about it, it's like it's too late. It's like we were trying to have this conversation decades ago, but you called us all these names, and now look where we're at. So you could point the blame at the Tories because they are complicit. You can point the blame at liberalism, and
just the softness of the establishment, the softness and the activist class as well within the establishment, whether it be the Home Office.
But do you know what? I get it as well, though. I understand why it's seen like that, because most people don't look at the news day in, day out. They don't know how government works or public institutions work. And they just see people coming across the channel, fleeing war. They're told that they're trying to find a better life. Who wouldn't want a better life? If you're living in some third world country somewhere, and you see the quality of life in England is better, of course, and that's what people see. So I get the objection to it. And also, I've been thinking in recent months, the Brits go to places like Benidorm,
yeah, of course,
and Tenerife and stuff. And they set up camp, and the Spaniards probably think the same as us. So whilst I am concerned about this kind of thing, and I will, keep raising concerns and debating people on it, and pushing forward what I think are good solutions, I'm also not going to get involved in too emotionally about it, because I just see it as theatre. I'm not here for long, and some people get too emotionally invested in it. And it sounds like a massive contradiction what I'm saying here, because it's such an important issue. It's kind of, for me, I've got 2 young kids. What kind of country do I want my kids growing up in the future? But at the same time, I don't want to scupper the short time I've got here getting bogged down in things which I think is, I probably can't change much anyway, to be honest.
Well, to be fair, there's one thing getting bogged down about it, but there's another that you're highlighting the key issues, and that's more than what most people can do. And I think the frustration is the fact that a lot of people aren't being listened to, and they don't have platforms like yourself and me who can go out and post something on Twitter and get 1,000 likes in one day, and that you can raise issues or turn the Overton window on a completely relevant topic or subject. So there's one thing getting emotionally attached to a topic or an issue, but then there's what you're doing, which is calling it out, talking about it on mainstream television, which is so important. And
you know what? That goes. Sorry to interrupt. That goes back to Ofcom and GB News. You got people saying, "Oh, GB News is controlled opposition,"
right,
whatever else. Yes, we're confined to the rules of Ofcom, but would the conversation and the arena be better with GB News there? Throwing scraps of meat to people who had never come across these kind of conversations before. Maybe we can't dive deep enough that some people want. Or would society be better without GB News there, not having these conversations, no matter how deep or what's the word? How deep or elaborate they go,
Sure. Sure.
You sometimes you just gotta play the game, play within the rules. You know what the rules are. Have the conversations and have the platform for some sort of debate, which you try and raise awareness. It's not an all or nothing thing where it's like, we need a broadcaster where we need to talk about this, and this, and all this kind of stuff. Like, was the moon landing faked and all this kind of crap. Just having something there which wasn't there before, and the ability and the platform to talk about these things within the rules of Ofcom, whether you agree with them or not, is a good thing. So all these people are like, "Oh, GB News controlled opposition." It's like, okay, I mean, no one else on national TV is having this conversation, so it might not be up to your standard in your ideological purity, but I'd argue that it's still doing a good service, and it's helping to raise awareness for a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have dared or even thought about having these conversations before.
Yeah, I think there's one thing to add to that. You're kind of in the backyard of these mainstream organizations as well. I mean, we all know that the BBC, Channel 4, all of these other massive media platforms, they struggle to talk about these topics or to get a dissident voice on. I say dissident, someone who's so someone like GB News would get 2 people in, one oppose, one for, and then obviously I wish the segments were longer so you can sort of expand on people's points. I think that's the only thing that I would say is a bit sort of annoying, because you want to hear more. You want people to really dive in with
statistics, with facts, and I don't think 10 minutes or 15 minutes is enough. You need an hour at least, but you have to reserve that for a special kind of show. But you don't see the BBC really doing that. Channel 4 and the BBC used to do that, but I think it's changed so much, and it's a massive crackdown on people raising concerns about certain topics that I think worries them a bit. So I think that's the issue. And Ofcom as well, not to go back onto Ofcom again, but with the online safety bill, now the power is transitioning over to the internet, and the potential for Ofcom to look into whether it be YouTube channels, whether it be content creators online. I think a lot of people are a bit sort of worried about that, because those rules can now apply to other content creators that aren't broadcasters, right?
I don't know why people who are concerned about freedom of speech are using YouTube anyway, because you don't get freedom of speech on YouTube. Anything to do with Google, you're not going to get anything remotely liberating or libertarian on there, So again, these people who are like, oh my God, the online safety bill is coming for my YouTube channel. It's like, well, mate, like you haven't got a clue anyway, because you got a YouTube channel. And it's the same. I mean, that's one thing that irks me about all this like truther movement, and a lot of these big groups that have risen from the ashes, like off COVID. All these like freedom groups and stuff. Right. Half of them went and got triple vaxxed and were calling for lockdowns in early 2020 anyway. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like it's all theatre. No one really knows what they're talking about. They're just joining, like, as I've mentioned earlier in the chat, they're just joining a movement to be part of a movement, and, complaining about the online safety bill. It's like, if you really cared about free speech and whatever else, you wouldn't be on YouTube in the first place. So it makes me not want to even listen to anyone who's like doing that. It's just,
you could argue that being on a platform like YouTube, I mean, you could make this argument. You can feel free to push back on this. You could make the argument that people creating content on YouTube that pushes back on certain narratives that are towards the line could be, you could akin to, having a broadcaster, for example, like GB News, that's in the backyard of, with Ofcom and with the other sort of rivaling people like the BBC and other mainstream sort of outlets. You could argue that it's not too dissimilar.
Yeah, but the difference is, I don't go around saying, GB News is the, I think GB News is doing amazing stuff, and I'm proud to work there. But I don't go around. I understand the sphere that we're operating in,
right?
And I don't go around saying like, independent media, YouTube is the bastion of free speech and all this stuff. Like I'm fully aware of the battlegrounds we're operating in, and I play the game, and right. it's I don't know. I just get exasperated with all these so-called freedom fighters who are banging on about loads of stuff that they've only just discovered in the last couple of weeks, and they're actually, they're just. I get it. I get abused so much on Twitter and things for being like controlled opposition and this and that, and I don't know, I'm going down a bit of a ranting rabbit hole.
No, you're fine, mate. No, you're absolutely fine. I think a lot of people feel from the last few years, they feel like that they've been lied to so much that they don't really know where to turn, and they are quite disenfranchised. So I try to look at several cases of people who are shouting these things. I'm trying to figure out where this is kind of coming from, and I think a lot of the time it's because of this horrible policy decisions that the government made during 2020 all the way up to now. During that time, a lot of people just feel so disenfranchised, and I admit that attacking people such as yourself on social media doesn't solve anything. I think it's ridiculous.
I think my problem is I've been aware since I was very little about how corrupt things are and how corrupt governments can be. I've got a family member who's a haemophiliac. My mum refused. This was in like maybe the 90s. My mum was aware that they were using contaminated blood products from Skid Row in America, from prostitutes, from drug dealers, riddled with hepatitis and all other nasty diseases. And yet the UK government, to do things on the cheap, would get these blood products, give them to haemophiliacs. In the UK, there was a big school in Hampshire, the Trelaw School for haemophiliacs. A lot of them are dead now because they were given contaminated products by the government. And the government knew it. The government knew what they were doing, and they tried to hide it for years. And that is what we now know as the contaminated blood scandal. I think the inquiry is still going on. So I've known since I was young how absolutely rotten and corrupt the government can be. And I've known since I was a kid that the government's not your friend. The government just doesn't give a damn about you. So even when COVID came around, I wasn't overly, of course it was a massive shock to see them behaving so nefariously and shamelessly in public, but I'd already known about all this stuff anyway. So I guess for me, with people, I sound a bit arrogant really, but I guess for me, with all these like freedom groups birthing after COVID, and just it gets a bit frivolous for me. I'm just like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I think I sound like a dickhead saying that and speaking as I am, but that's just how it's just a bit boring for me.
Right, got you. Okay. I think you have to remember as well, man, like a lot of people followed narratives, and a lot of people do not know a lot of things that the government has done in the past. I mean, I only found out very recently about geoengineering, for example, very, very recently. And you go back to RAF rainmakers in the 50s and the technology that was used there, about the Lynmouth flood. And this technology had been around since the 50s, maybe even before that. And it had been used to sort of to disrupt crops and things like that during, like, at the Soviet Union. And, it's been used as a weapon, but also been used to experiment. And that has been declassified and proven. It has been used on citizens, their own citizens. And I think a lot of people would say things like, and including me, would say things like, why would the government that's supposed to be there to protect us do such a thing to us? So I think a lot of these freedom groups, I do understand that it comes from this anger, and it's come from this way of, I have been lied to. These people have lied to me, and some people, not all, I'm not going to say all or a lot, but I think some people feel so pissed off that they've been lied to, and that they've maybe swallowed a few narratives over the past decade or so. They're like, I need to know more, and I need more people to speak about it. So there might be just frustration there. I'm trying to be as rational as possible and trying to think.
100%. No, I completely get it. Like, I'm not totally self-absorbed that I don't get it. I do. But I'm at the stage really where I'm past. In my late teens, early 20s, I was, combined with stuff that happened in my childhood, I was pretty. I guess I was angry. Not angry in like a violent sense or anything, but I was, always angry about the way things were, and how governments were behaving and stuff. So, I mean, mate, this is mad. I uncovered the other day a letter I wrote to Tony Blair when I was 10. I'll see if I can find it for you.
I'm not going to ask you how old you are now.
I'm in my 30s now.
Oh, nice. But
I wrote a letter to Tony Blair when I was 10, and I was at school, and I was urging him to bring back capital punishment.
At 10?
Yeah. And mate, I don't know where that came from, but I wrote this really eloquent letter saying we should not be allowing paedophiles and killers in this country, blah, blah, blah. I really urge you to bring back capital punishment. I read it the other day. I was like, what the? I was like,
10-year-old Ben Leo writing that to Tony Blair. That's funny.
So I guess I've always had this sense of, justice and, But my point was, I lost my train of thought. My point was, I that kind of stuff really used to get me angry, and the start of COVID got me angry as well. But again, I've kind of tried to adopt a more philosophical approach to it, where anger doesn't do any good really. It does in certain situations for a very small amount of time, but if you're permanently angry at the world.
I agree.
And pissed off at the world
I agree.
all the time. It's just not good for you, man. You're going to die early.
I agree. I totally agree. Speaking about things that make us angry in the short term and annoyed, let's talk about the recent thing that happened in Brussels involving NatCon. Obviously, lots of different speakers went. Obviously, your colleagues went as well, including Farage, and the police came and tried to basically shut it down under orders from the mayor, I believe, of Brussels. And I saw that you were pretty angry on Twitter about that, or a bit annoyed, I should say, not angry.
I think I wrote, the EU hates us, Biden hates us, most, a good portion of Brits hate themselves and the country. I think I said, again, I'm not a massive Trump fan because of what he did during COVID, but I said the only person who does like us is probably Donald Trump. So best hope that he wins the election.
Yeah. Thoughts on that? I mean, we've seen over the past few decades anyway, and of course it's like the last couple of years, it's really ramped up. This idea of not policing, I wouldn't go as far as policing, but sharing ideas that are, I say, conservative or on the right, and issues such as mass migration and lots of different subjects. You've seen this almost knee-jerk reaction to sort of either shut it down or just completely just change the conversation, or like what we've seen with Brussels here, just cancel events, cancel culture, utilising that as a weapon. Thoughts on the entire sort of ordeal?
Obviously it was a massive sham what happened in Brussels. The argument, especially from a lot of Labour MPs who've commented, has said that, you had some types there who were like supportive or sympathetic towards, what's that Norwegian killer called? He went and killed loads of kids.
I think I know the one, the Nazi guy.
Yeah, like apparently there's someone who attended the conference who supported him or said he understood why he did it or something, and a couple of other like wackos and stuff. And it's the old problem that UKIP used to have back in the day, where David Cameron would call them fruitcakes and loons. Yeah, there were. Same with Reform. That Reform are having their own problems now with people who have allegedly said things that aren't acceptable to people. But you're always going to get those types of characters tagging along to these kind of freedom movements or conservative movements even. And that was the argument for shutting it down, especially from the mayor, the mayor of Brussels, who was saying, it's for public safety. I mean, the truth is that they just don't want to hear other people's ideas. The European Union, Brussels is the epicenter of the European Union, of course, and the European Union is the most undemocratic institution going. They don't want to hear differing opinion. They've not even audited their accounts, I don't think, in the past 20 years. So, they're about as transparent as a blackout blind. But I just think on this occasion, it was just this Brussels mayor who went on a bit of a power trip and exercised, more power than he should probably have. And in actual fact, credit to the Belgian PM, he came out and said that, it's a complete disgrace what happened at the NatCon event. But I was a bit dismayed to see Labour and was it Wes Streeting at the ballot box giggling about it with his MPs behind him. Like,
what do you think of that?
I think it's just really short-sighted and it's pathetic and it's juvenile and they just obviously don't get it. That's the difference between a lot of people on the right and the left. I will die for the right of people I don't agree with to voice their thoughts and their opinions. It's free speech. It's the bastion of a free society and a working society. But when these people from the other side of the argument say, "Well, no, that's fine because I don't agree with them," they're just completely missing the point. And in actual fact, they're just thick as two wooden planks. For a government in waiting like Labour, for Wes Streeting to do that, it's just a bit. I quite like Wes Streeting. I think he's quite a good guy. I quite like him, but for him, it's just stupid. And also, why would you're pandering to a very small faction of voters and idiots, especially from like the FBP guys on Twitter, some of the most toxic, brain dead people going. You're just pandering to them. when in actual fact, probably most of Labour's voters this coming year will say that what happened in Brussels at NatCon was a disgrace. So I don't know. It was just a bit stupid, and yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm yet to see someone come out and say that it was a disgrace from that side. I'll be honest with you. I've not seen that just yet. You may have seen it. I haven't seen that at all.
Well, I mean, most people aren't on Twitter.
Yep.
I think if you speak to, I reckon, I'm just guessing here. I don't know what the stats are, but if you look at how many people are going to vote for Labour this year, I reckon probably maybe 20% are on Twitter. And I reckon most other people would say, yeah, no, that's not a good thing to shut down the free flowing thought of ideas and debate and whatever else, just because there's a few nutters in the crowd, you know.
I think I don't know. I think you're very optimistic, and I really like that, man. Like, I think it's really good. I think you're very optimistic in that respect. I'm not sure. I think there is a large portion of people that do not, if they really disagree with something, they would quite happily even get the law on their side. And I think we've seen things like non-crime hated incidences and, all the malarkey with that. I don't know, man. I think a lot of people do not want to see certain ideas, whether it be conservative, whether it be on the right. I think there are a lot of people that don't want to see that and actually refuse to have conversations about that, and would quite happily, instead of saying, let them just, the old liberal sort of just whatever will be, let them, let them speak their mind. I don't think we're going to see that.
They're all your old mates, all the communists, they're all your pals. No, I'm not saying they're not there, but
no. I think there's a lot of them. I think there's more than we think.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too generous. I just think we live and operate in a bit of a bubble. As I said earlier, I think majority of people don't spend their days on the internet, on Twitter, reading the news, working in the news.
Do you know what? To be fair, this could be my bias coming in, because you have to remember that not the average Brit thinks like us at all. I think there's things that me and you may disagree with. And there's a lot that we do agree with each other, but there's a lot of people that just don't think like us, right? There's a lot of people that, and it's almost like we have to take our minds out and say, just give it a shake and say, look, come on, like the average person does not think in these terms. They'd quite happily just go to the pub for a quiet drink and then go home, and after a long day's of work.
I guess ignorance is bliss for a lot of the time, and I also understand. I mean, my missus, she doesn't know what's going on in terms of politics or news, and actually I like that. I don't want to come home and start talking about politics and stuff with her, so that's quite nice. But there definitely are some people out there who want to silence debate. Of course, I mean, we've seen it amplified since Brexit, and I mean the BBC are guilty of it. They sat on Newsnight last year with a 3-person panel, all discussing whether GB News should be shut down.
I saw that.
And they all said, yes. And this is our national broadcaster. So, of course it's there. Of course it's there. And there is a fight there to be had.
Are you concerned? Are you concerned that might amplify? Like, given that we have a brand new government? I mean, to be fair, you might disagree with me on this, but I'm a 0 seats guy for the Tories. I want them returned to dust. Yeah. Are you same there?
They need it, yeah.
Yeah. And just to regrow like something completely different with actual conservative policies. But there is, speaking to Nick last week, there is that worry about a Labour majority, which I'm not sure is actually going to happen. I don't think it's going to be a majority. There's something telling me that it's not, even though we're seeing polls which are completely different, but polls can be wrong. Did it predict Brexit? Did it predict Trump?
Well,
no.
I said I used to be a big gambler, and I've moved into more sort of like trading assets and commodities and stuff. And whenever the crowd says, "Yeah, this is nailed on," it's never nailed on.
It's never nailed on.
Just counter trade the crowd, because the crowd operate as a mass, like a herd of sheep, and whenever they say something is guaranteed, it won't happen. That's how you make money. Just counter trade Twitter, basically.
Right.
So I think Labour will win, but they're being, in terms of the betting markets anyway, they're so overpriced or underpriced rather. I mean, they're odds on in pretty much every seat. So I don't think it's going to play out as people think. And really, as well, they should have just done what Joe Biden did and just hide in Labour. They should have just hidden in their basement, because the more they talk and the more they U-turn on policies, and the more people like Wes Streeting do silly things like he did the other day, laughing at the closure or the attempted closure of the NatCon event.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by itself, it's a very small, isolated gaffe in my view. It's like, Wes Streeting's been a bit silly there. But when you, over the course of a year, when you add all these things together, it just doesn't make them look very good, and the electorate will be put off that. And when they're so far ahead in the polls, best thing you can do is just shut your mouth. You're going to win. You've got an open goal. Don't mess it up.
Yeah, it's true. That is very true. But are you concerned about a potential Labour majority? Do you think that that's going to have a massive knock-on effect, or are we just going to see just exactly the same thing as what we've seen with the Tories, or is it going to be a sped-up conveyor belt of policies?
I was talking to the hairdresser about this earlier. He's like, "You're worried about Labour?" And I said, "Well, not really. I mean, how can they do any worse than the Tories on migration?
Mm-hmm.
How can they do any worse?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be different?
Ignoring it?
I mean, the Tories have ignored it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I mean, look how many people they've let in over the last 14 years. The Tories were in government. They were in coalition for some of that. But they had a stonking 80-seat majority in 2019, and they've spaffed it up the wall by not listening to anyone. So they've just ignored it. So when people are like, "Oh my God, Labour are coming in," I don't want to see Labour in, because I think they'll probably try and clamp down on press freedoms and stuff, and maybe introduce a Leveson too.
Yeah.
You know, they'll probably put pressure on Ofcom and stuff. But I mean, in terms of migration, anyway, I mean, what's different? They're the same. Labour and the Conservatives, apart from a very few Tories, are people of the same ilk under a different colour. They are the uni party. They are career politicians. They're people who most of them wouldn't get a job in any FTSE 100 company, you know, at corporate level. They're just completely inept, low-grade charlatans who have been, you know, went to university, studied maybe politics and, you know, economics or something, went to some think tank, went to be an intern for some MP, became an MP themselves. Like, these people have no idea what it's like to be in the real world. They don't know real people. And the only decision they have to make is, should I be a Conservative or should I run for Labour? There's no difference between these parties these days.
Right.
And that's why I'm not too exercised about the fact that Labour are going to get. As you said, I think it's a good thing, because it will wipe the Tories out and it may give them a kick up the backside to maybe rediscover some Conservative principles.
Yeah.
That's probably, I mean, that's what Reform are doing. I don't think Reform really give a damn about winning that many seats. I think under this first past the post, they won't win many seats. UKIP got something like 4 million votes in 2015, the third biggest party. They got one seat. So I mean, that's a bit of a scam. But I think I agree with Reform's ethos, which is just destroy the Tories.
Personal question. And obviously this can change. Obviously, this won't be your final answer right now. But who would you vote for? Or is that too personal?
No one.
No one? You're not going to vote?
I don't care. I think it's all theatre. Honestly, I just
spoil
don't
your ballot.
What's the point? I've seen people saying that online. So why would I bother going down to my local village hall on a rainy evening to spoil my ballot, which, you know, some parish councillor is going to see it? Like, who cares?
Right.
I'd rather go to the gym and train.
And if well, is there anyone, even a small party, that you might sort of at least consider like crossing? I'm pushing now.
I voted for the Greens locally because
no, you didn't.
Because they were some developers threatening to build on a really nice plot of green space near my house, which is like, it's been there for centuries, and people walk their dogs there, and it's by the sea and it's lovely. And this developer wants to come and build loads of. I wouldn't mind if they were nice houses, but I hate new builds.
Right.
They are. I think they're the scourge. They just look horrible. All these toy town estates popping up everywhere with their fake artificial grass. Anyway, they wanted to build a big development on this green space, and the Greens, along with Sir Peter Bottomley, actually, my MP, they were opposing it. So I was like, the guy knocks at the door. I said, I don't agree with anything you do nationally. I said, I've got, very vocal opinions about against climate change and things like that. But I said, if your big policy locally is stopping that development, then I'll vote for you. So
fair enough. So I guess it's just watching it from home and not taking part, right?
Yeah, because I don't know if I'm managing to articulate. I sound like such a weirdo because.
No, you don't.
No, I do, because I understand how this is going to look. I go on air and I get passionate about politics and stuff, and I am passionate about it. But I'm also aware that it's all theatre.
Yeah.
And we're getting down some like sort of deep spiritual level here, but philosophical level. I'm also operating on the thesis that nothing really matters anyway. Like,
right? Is this a Nietzsche like?
Yeah, it's just like we're playing a game of life. There's characters, we're all playing a character and playing our part, and there's dramas going on, and I'll get involved in it. But I just know it's all a game, and again, I can't really articulate really what my strange position is, but
it's a shame you didn't mention this earlier. I would have started evangelizing about Jesus Christ like a nutter.
But I'm not religious at all. Like
No.
I got married in the church
Cool,
last year. I mean, there's lots of good lessons and values from Christianity that
Cultural Christian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cultural Christian. That's the one. But I've always had I've said before now, I've always had some sort of relationship or affinity with Jesus. And of course, I believe in God. Maybe not a God that sits in the sky judging people, but I believe in like a higher power, and maybe we are the higher power. Maybe we're all part of that, collective consciousness. But I have faith that there is something beyond this, and there's greater powers at work. And that, I guess, maybe it's just me being again, ignorance is bliss. Maybe it's just my way of comforting myself at how fucked up the world is.
Well, Ben, yeah, it's just it's a shame that we didn't speak about this earlier. To be fair, actually, no, it's a good thing because we wouldn't have been speaking about all the other things we were speaking about. Well, maybe not to try and evangelize because, I'm still very, very new. But I don't know, maybe you could, if you wanted or if you had time, you could look into Jesus a bit more. I mean, you say you like the stuff that he said and that he's done. I mean, I looked into it and I was quite taken back by not only his teachings, but if it is true, put it this way, if it is true, there's a lot of people that are in a lot of trouble and it's not good. And you want to kind of tell people, it's like keeping from someone, how I vision it is this. Let's say you've been given some good news that will help others, but then you keep it to yourself. Now, does that make you a bad person? I would argue yes. I would argue that if you didn't.
So what is the consequence for non-believers in your book?
I think it's difficult because you have to look at the reliability of people. There are obviously different religions that have a different way, like a different viewpoint of whether it be salvation or whether it be proclaiming the truth of what they're pushing out. So when you look at reliability, I've looked at various others from various other religions, and it seems to me that every single one seems to point at one man or one person or one deity, and that is Jesus, which I was really taken back by. And this was when I was a theist. Like yourself, I believed in something, but I wasn't sure what it was. Everyone seems to be pointing at him. So I thought, okay, well, let's look into this Jesus guy. And there's only 3 outcomes from it. He was either a liar, he was either a psychopath, or he was what he claimed to be, the Son of God. And I thought, okay, well, let's go through it. And I read a little book, which I'd like to gift to you, actually. We haven't met for a pint yet, and I'm not going to properly evangelize, over a pint. But there's a little book called More Than a Carpenter, which lays out the evidence of him, what he said, what he did, historical accuracy and accounts, and the resurrection. And over 500 people saw him after his resurrection. That's more evidence than Julius Caesar's death. There's no eyewitness testimonies to Julius Caesar's death.
Right?
And it was taken from his biographer that he was killed by 6 or 7 people, conspirators. So then
it's not even a debate that Jesus existed or not. Like whether you're religious or not, many scholars,
even atheist scholars, exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's not when people go, "Oh, Jesus is just like a made-up guy." It's not. Jesus existed, whether you're religious or not. A man called Jesus existed in that area, or I think it was Palestine at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he existed. So
yeah. So,
but my issue is right. I don't. As far as I'm aware, Jesus was the Son of God, but I know we are all the Son of God. I don't think Jesus was particularly the chosen one. I think Jesus was a man documented at a time where he did incredible things. He was finally in tune with himself. Miracles happened, but I believe we're all capable of miracles. I believe we're all the Son of God, and I don't put Jesus. I have a special relationship with Jesus, but that comes from the fact that, as far as I perceive it, we are all powerful and, innately holy and special. I don't see myself as I also don't see myself as a sinner either. I don't believe Jesus died on the cross to save our sin. I don't believe that. I don't believe I'm not a sinner. I don't think you're a sinner. I don't think many people are sinners. I think they act and behave, based on their ignorance. I don't think they're sinners. Many people, anyway.
Put it this way: Jesus said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end," meaning that he was the first and the last, claiming his claims that he was God, not just the Son, but was God. And to add to all of that, I think you have to look at the reliability, is what I would say.
Hang on one sec. Sorry to interrupt. Do you see yourself separate from God?
Yes. So I believe that I am a wretched sinner. I believe that I am wretched and that I have done terrible things in my life. And I do believe that Jesus, like the reliability says, that he did die on Calvary's cross for us, and that at his last breath, when 2 thieves were next to him, and one thief turned to him and said, "Please remember me when you go to heaven." And then he said, I will remember you. But he didn't go out and get baptized. He didn't work at a kitchen soup or, give charity or whatever. He forgave him on the spot. And the other guy said, "Okay, guy from Nazareth, take yourself, if you're the Son of God, just take yourself off the cross. You have this power, go and do it." But he needed to do that because it was fulfillment. Now, you can call me a nutter. You can call me whatever you like. It actually doesn't bother me. I know the mentality of secularism because I grew up a secularist. I didn't have a Christian friend, a religious friend at all, until I had an experience, which was very recently, and I realized that there is something more. And then when I explained this experience to an atheist friend, he said, "Well, how do you not know that if someone, either a Muslim or a Hindu, experienced the same thing as you, how come that's turned you to Christ? Wouldn't they have done the same thing?" And I said, I wish I would have said, yes, it would have turned them to Christ, a Muslim or a Hindu, but I decided to look into other religions, and they all seem to be pointing at him, and he was the only one, not Buddha, not Krishna, not Muhammad, he was the only one who claimed to be God and the Son of God. So that makes me think, okay, well, he's either a liar and he's completely lying, but then I don't know why a thumbs up went up there on the emoji.
He's a liar.
Yeah. He's either a liar, which means that a lot of people, whether it be the apostles who died and was tortured, one of them was tortured upside down for a lie. And that begs the question, why would anyone die for a lie? And that's an interesting one. Or he was a psychopath, which means all he was saying was a load of nutty things, like completely nuts.
I don't think he was lying. I believe in the story of Jesus. But I just think personally, if you see yourself as detached from God and Christ consciousness, you are defying everything that Jesus wanted for you. It makes me sad to hear you say that you think you're a wretched sinner.
I am, man. I am, and you know what? The guilt is good. I think the guilt is very good. I know this is polar opposite, but he said the only way to the Father is through him. Now, if he was lying, then that's grave. That's a big problem. But he wasn't a liar because of the reliability and what he claimed to have been, and the prophecies before him that pointed at him through the Old Testament. So there's plenty of scripture that that doesn't contradict that at all. But it's interesting, man. I mean, maybe one day we can have a longer conversation about it, because there's so much.
I think definitely. I think the important thing is that no matter whether you prescribe to Jesus or even whatever you want to choose, a Jedi Knight or whatever. I mean, I think as long as you're a good person and you're being honest with yourself, and I think one of the most important things in this life is to be truthful as well. That's a massive lesson I've learned. Just truth is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think as long as you prescribe to those values, you're not far off.
Well, I'll be praying for you after, man, whether you like it or not.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I wish we had more time, but I think that's a good moment to start wrapping up. But Ben, thank you so much for taking the time out. I mean, I know you're a busy guy. You're very outspoken, and you have conviction in what you believe, which I actually really respect. Despite all the Ofcom stuff, despite the online safety bill stuff, despite what you're being called online by the FBPE, I don't even know what they are. Strange weirdos online, and even being attacked from people on your base, quote unquote, just because you go against some things that they may talk about. I say all more power to you in that respect, because at the end of the day, you have conviction. So yeah, I want to say, man, thank you so much for taking your time out, and keep going, keep doing what you're doing, man. I think you do important work. So thank you.
Thanks, dude. I really appreciate that. I said to someone the other day, it's funny, I get so many people now coming up to me in the street or at train stations, or I was on the plane on holiday the other month holding, my baby, just stretching my legs, and two guys came up on the plane, and they were so genuine. They shook my hand and said, "Thank you so much for everything you're doing at GB News and the channel's doing." And I was like, "Oh, that's very sweet of you. Thank you." And when people say that to me, I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly special. I'm just having fun, going on air, doing, talking about interesting things and having debates and stuff. I don't really see myself as doing sort of, God's work or anything. But
you never know, you might be.
Yeah, but it's appreciated. Yeah, thank you, man. It's been a really, really insightful chat as well, and we'll have to go for that beer, definitely.
We'll sort that out. Ben Leo, thank you so much.
Thanks, dude. Cheers, though.